morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. I'm Kat Eaton with JBS International. Thank you for joining today's Ask an Expert office hour session with Jason Harris on mindfulness in the workplace. Before we begin, there's a few housekeeping items we need to review. So let's go on and get those. So today's presentation is intended to be an interactive discussion between the presenters and the participants. However, we do ask that participants keep themselves on mute unless requested to unmute and use the raise hand feature in Zoom to indicate that you have a question. We also encourage you to turn on your video, especially when asking questions to the presenters. In addition, oh, and of course, as soon as I start, some more people show up. I'm so sorry. In addition, please feel free to use the chat feature or to interact with presenters and ask questions if needed. Open your chat window by clicking on the chat icon located at the bottom of your toolbar window. Near the end of the session, we will request that anyone who wants to receive additional information and resources related to the session send their email in the chat, and we will also we'll add you to this office hour sessions listserv. There will be a link to a post-event survey sent in the chat at the end of the presentation, as well as emailed to all registered participants in the coming days. We would greatly appreciate it if you filled it out, as this will support future development efforts. If you experience any technical issues during the session, please message us using the chat feature or email us at obc-tta@jbsinternational.com. Today's office hour session is being recorded for sharing. The recording, along with other resources, will be made available to the OBC TTA listserv in the coming weeks. And now I'd like to turn things over to our presenter for today, Jason Harris.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And again, I'll welcome everybody to the session today. And just to quickly go over kind of what I plan to cover. And to begin with, I may, have us just participate in a short 2-minute mindfulness practice that'll help us transition again out of whatever it is that we may have been doing previously to where we're at right now. But then I just plan to go over just a few slides, not a full presentation, but just a few slides to kind of set a foundation of where I'm coming from with this and what it is that I'm hoping to communicate. And throughout that process, you're also free to stop me at any time and ask any questions along the way, even while I'm sharing the slides, with any questions or comments that you would like to have. We don't have, a very extremely large group, so you can feel free to unmute yourself as well and talk or drop something into the chat as well. Feel free to have your cameras on or off during the presentation and during any of the practices. So we'll start with a practice and we'll end with a practice. And my goal is to also end at least 5 minutes early before the next hour. And that's an example of ways that, mindfulness kind of based strategies can be implemented and worked into the workplace, is by thinking about those things that when it's possible, we may not have to go back to back all the time with meetings on Zoom. And if we can end 5 minutes early, that's great, to give ourselves time to transition from one thing to the next, whatever we may be doing. This is always voluntary. So if you don't want to participate in the short, mindfulness practices, you can feel free to shut your camera off and, do something else during that time. But I'm assuming since you're here, most of you are pretty okay with that. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and start with a practice to transition in. And this is an example of a practice that can be integrated into the workplace in between meetings with colleagues who are all on the same page and agreement. Obviously it's always something that should be voluntary when being done in the workplace. A little about myself. I've been working in the behavioral health field for, over 20 years, and I have my training as a certified workplace mindfulness facilitator. And in my list of resources, I give you all information on how to go about pursuing that training. And for the purpose of today, and for the purpose of talking about mindfulness in the workplace, I'm really coming from a mindfulness-based stress reduction approach and lens. And there's all different types of modalities out there. I also practice yoga, which can be considered mindful movement, or Qigong, or other things that we all may be aware of. And that's great to explore. But for the purpose of the workplace, what I have found and what the evidence really points to is there's many decades now of scientific evidence building up towards mindfulness-based stress reduction and its benefits, not only for workers, but also for medical related conditions and things. And it's been integrated into the field of medicine for quite a while now. So just starting there. And with that, go ahead and let's just start getting focused in. For the purpose of guiding this meditation, I'm going to shut my camera off. You can do whatever you feel most comfortable with. And just start noticing, start noticing the weight of your body in the chair as we start to settle in on this 2-minute, what I call a micro practice. And I just want to let you know up front, obviously, some of you may have a lot of experience with mindfulness, others may not, but it's natural and normal for your mind to wander during this practice. Being in the workplace, we may hear our email chime during this practice. One of my strategies is when I hear my email chime, I allow that to be the reminder to let my breath flow into my low belly. And this is really the practice. When you notice your mind wandering off, thinking about something else, and you notice that, simply bring it back to your breath or your body, whatever you feel most comfortable with. So this is just an example of a micro practice, but there's all different types of ways we can integrate the cultivation of mindful awareness throughout our workday, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But welcome to this 2-minute mindful pause. This will prepare you to be fully present and focused in your next activity. So let's begin by settling into your seat, letting your hands rest by your side or in your lap, allowing your eyes to close gently, or simply looking downward with a soft gaze and coming to a pause. Now tuning into your breath and noticing what it feels like to simply breathe naturally. Maybe taking a mental note of the fact that your breathing is happening all on its own. Staying present to the full cycle of breath, inhaling and opening up to this moment. Exhaling and releasing, letting go of anything that's not serving you right now. And now, if you'd like, you can take a moment to reflect on how you want to be as you proceed with this next activity. Calm, centered, focused, balanced. Choosing an attitude that you'd like to embody and setting an intention for being this way while doing what you need to do next. And now with this breath, or the next one following, opening your eyes or lifting your gaze and ready to engage fully and intentionally in this next activity. And so with that, I'll turn my camera back on, and you're all welcome to also have your cameras on or off, whatever you feel. And you can also feel free to drop something in the chat if you feel like sharing how that was for you. Feel free. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and bring up my slides just to, again, set a foundation of where I'm coming from and what I'm talking about today. So hopefully everyone can see them. And I'm not going to, again, go through every single slide I have here today, but just highlight a few things. And I see your comment. Thank you, Carlos. So as we know, currently, our world and the workplace, change is always occurring. And there's a quote that I like to share related to change, that it's never happened this fast before, and it will never be this slow again. And sometimes that can lead to life feeling somewhat like this scribbly lines that you see on the paper here. And I see someone, I can go ahead and admit them here. And sometimes, life in the workplace can feel uncertain, complex, ambiguous. In other words, there can be a lot of stress involved with life in general and with the workplace in general. And what happens is when life may be feeling like this scribbly lines that we see on the paper, or the workplace may be feeling that way, or the workday, that is where we start getting into experiencing the stress response. And I'm sure many of you are very familiar with a lot of the things that I'll be talking about today, but I'd just like to set the foundation. Stress response, what that looks like, how it manifests in our body. Increased heart rate, blood pressure, tensing of our muscles, scanning the room, scanning around, being distracted, trying to focus on, lots of things, sensitive to negative information, shallow breathing. It can elevate our blood glucose, slow our digestion, and lower our immune response. So as I'm sure many of you know, that stress can have negative, outcomes on our health and well-being. And so we have the stress response, and we have the topic of chronic stress. And what is that? The difference between stress and chronic stress is stress may come and go, and we may get stressed out about something and return to a place of balance, which is really what we're meant to do. But chronic stress is when, we have this long-term activation of the stress response, resulting in a psychological or physiological imbalance and strain. In other words, we get caught up in stress day after day, all throughout our day, and we're not really doing anything about it. And sometimes, obviously, the work environments, currently I'm working on my dissertation, and my dissertation is related to integrating mindfulness into the medical field, medical and behavioral health field, for the purpose of stress mitigation. And some environments are more stressful than others. And sometimes it is the stress in the environment, but as we all know, sometimes trying to change a system or a hospital system or a work environment can be very difficult. It may take a long time, and it may not happen. So that stress, regardless, may be present in our environment. And it starts coming down to, what can we do as individuals to really begin to mitigate the impact that the stressful environment is having on our own health and well-being in the meantime, while we're hoping and trying to make changes maybe within our workplace or work structures. But being exposed to chronic stress, so stress day in and day out, all day long, being in that place of automatic pilot, can lead to muscle aches, headaches, heart disease, irritability, anxiety, focus and memory impairments, sleep disturbances, and digestive issues, which eventually can lead us to this place of exhaustion, disengagement, and burnout. So just touching on the term of resilience, and that's really what we're talking about, is the ability to effectively manage and recover from stressful events. Because that's really the good news, and that's what we're here to talk about today, is that we really have the capabilities to come out of chronic stress, to bring ourselves out of chronic stress. And that's really what we talk about when we talk about resilience. And we have the capacity to get stressed out and then come back to a place of balance. And when we do that, and when we're intentional about that throughout our day, especially throughout our workday, we can really avoid the physical and mental toll of chronic stress. And so I want to just briefly touch on the differences between mindfulness and meditation. And I have that question come up a lot, and the terms get thrown around a lot. We hear the term mindfulness associated with a lot of things these days. But mindfulness, coming from the mindfulness-based stress reduction lens, is really paying attention to your present moment experience with an attitude of openness. So it's really about cultivating the ability to be present right here in this moment, not necessarily thinking about, tomorrow or what you have coming up after this meeting or what you were doing before this meeting, but what you're doing right now, and developing the capacity to be able to know what you're doing and be present and know how you're doing in the moment can be really beneficial to mitigating your stress throughout the day. So meditation is really the exercise that increases your capacity to be mindful throughout the day and to be present and in the moment. And when we're practicing meditation, which many of you may be aware of, the mind wanders away, and then you notice and you bring it back to your intended point of focus. Throughout the day, eventually, just like you may say and other things, we bring this out of our practice and into our day. So throughout the day, as we're finding that we're caught up in automatic pilot, or caught up in thinking about stressful deadlines, or caught up thinking about all the things we have to do next, and that's causing the stress response in us, we can notice and come back to our breath or come back to our body. We'll talk about little tips that we can integrate throughout our day to help us to do that. So what mindfulness is not. Mindfulness is not about tuning out or being relaxed or stopping your thoughts. In fact, most, medical doctors or scientists or whoever will tell you that, stopping your thoughts is probably not possible. Or making your mind go blank is not possible. And that's not what it's about. I've had people say to me in the past, no, I can't do meditation because there's no way I can make my mind go blank. And I'm always saying, well, that's good, because that's not the intention here. And it's not about being passive. In fact, building our awareness and our ability to become mindfulness or become more mindful can really help us to be more intentional about the impacts and changes that we do want to see and make in the work that we're doing. So mindfulness is about being self-aware, being perceptive and curious. And this is the key: responding instead of reacting, staying focused on what's important, and connecting more deeply with others within our workplace and the work that we do and just in our daily lives. So these are just a few slides just showing how it's changed over time, the number of people who have practiced mindfulness, large employers who are including some type of mindfulness training within their companies, or options like drop-in sessions, which I'll mention in just a minute, something I run through, here at with my company. So research on mindfulness, you can see back in early 2000, when I really first began to think about integrating mindfulness in the workplace, it was difficult. People didn't really want to hear me talking about it because look at the amount of research that there was related to it. Now, as we progress up to the year 2020, and now I can tell you it's even more than this because I'm researching it all the time for my dissertation, but it's just exponential. So there's thousands of research articles related to the benefits of mindfulness, not only in the workplace, but just on our overall health and well-being in general. And a lot of those research articles are connected to mindfulness-based stress reduction that was founded in the 1970s by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. So just quickly going through some of the benefits: emotional, reduce stress, increased resilience, cultivate self-awareness. And as I talk about this, we think about it not only how it benefits us as individuals, but may be beneficial in the work that we're doing with other people. The cognitive benefits: strengthen focus, improve memory, reduce bias. And these are all connected to research studies that have been done in these different areas, which I have a whole list if anybody ever wants me to send that along. The physical benefits: lowering the blood pressure, decreasing the heart rate, strengthening the immune system, improving the safety, and reducing injury. For example, in some different types of work environments, may it be factories or even in the medical field, there's research showing that, for example, nurses who participate in a 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course, are able to be more mindful about things that they're doing related to medications and medical errors and things like along these lines. So behavior: improving sleep, improving listening and communication, which we'll touch on. That's a great one for the workplace. Thinking about being fully attentive and listening when we're communicating, rather than thinking about what we're going to be saying next while the person's talking to us. I'm sure we've all been there. Having greater patience and persistence. Research has shown an increase in ethical behavior and decision-making. And the ability to facilitate habit change, for example, in, addictions and along those lines. Because you can think about that ability to intentionally respond, rather react, and you can start to build a space in between stimulus and response. So you hear the email chime go off, that might normally, really stress you out, another email coming in. But as you practice, you can connect that to, when I hear my email chime going off, that's going to be my reminder to get my breath into my belly. That's a strategy that works for me. Some other people say that strategy hasn't worked for me yet. It still annoys me or upsets me when I hear my email. So from reacting to responding, that's what we're really talking about today and where I'm coming from. So you see, you have stress in your environment, and then that leads to reacting emotionally. Business as usual often leads us into this place of going on autopilot, not really checking in with ourselves, just getting caught up in the stress of the day. And we may be breathing with only the top portion of our lungs. Our heart rate may be up, our blood pressure may be up, and we may not even realize it. But spending day after day like that without realizing it and doing something about it is what leads to the negative health outcomes and other burnout and other symptoms associated with being caught up in fight or flight all the time. And there's a medical doctor that engages in some of the practices that I do. And the other day, he said during the short 5-minute practice that we did, the thought that occurred to him was, when he sees patients on a regular basis and is checking their breathing, he notices that they're often breathing rapidly because they sense that he's in a hurry. And he mentioned that going forward, he had the thought occurred to him while practicing that he was going to suggest next time this happens that they slow down and take some mindful breaths. Even that right there makes me happy to hear. So business as usual, going on autopilot. And what we're talking about is this: mindful awareness. Starting to build up in between that stress and the reacting emotionally, in between the business as usual and the going on autopilot. Mindfulness creates an opportunity for us to check in with ourselves and also fully take in what's going on before we get pulled in this direction or that direction. So it's like having an internal place of balance that we can go to help us act skillfully, even during challenging and stressful situations. And so what we have is stress, and when we have mindful awareness in between that, it leads us to being able to respond intentionally. And instead of business as usual, when we can build that mindful awareness, that can help us move in the direction of being present and aware of what's going on with ourselves and our surroundings throughout the day, so that we can mitigate that stress response. Many of you may be familiar with this quote: between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. And that's attributed to Viktor Frankl. And I like this quote because it really touches on mindfulness in the sense that that's really what we're doing, is we're building space in between what happens and how we respond to it. So just some tips, and we're just about done with the slides, but just some tips for building resilience throughout the day. 10 minutes of mindfulness daily with your favorite app. And I'm sharing a whole list of apps as a part of the resources. And I'm going to show us one at the end of the session today with just a 5-minute practice using the Calm app. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Calm app. I've used the Calm app in the past when I was doing therapy, and my therapy sessions with folks who it worked. I used it with students. I've used it with, lots of different ways. And now I use it with colleagues as part of drop-in sessions. But checking in during the day is the key here. Taking brief pauses to check in with yourself throughout the day. Take a few slow breaths to close your eyes. One of the strategies I like to use is I take a sticky note and I place it on my computer, and it just says 2 to 3 seconds. And every time I see the sticky note, it reminds me to just, like this gentleman's doing in the photo here, lean back, close my eyes, take a few intentional and mindful breaths, and feel the difference from just simply doing that as many times throughout the day as you can, whether it's in between clients or in between patients or in between meetings or after or during a challenging discussion or difficult discussion. But checking in, and how does my body feel? What is my mood? Checking with the heart, checking with the mind. What thoughts are present? What am I doing? And I don't think I have it in these slides, but there's some research that shows that up to 40 to 50% of the time throughout our day, we're not even aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it. So then proceed with mindful awareness after checking in with yourselves. 1-minute mindful transitions. I showed you a 2-minute one that we did at the beginning of this session. Even 1 minute can make a big difference. Just taking 1 minute, set a timer and try to just, focus on your breath and your body for 60 seconds in between things. And for some people that may be too much, and that's where I say just 2 to 3 breaths. So bringing resilience during the day, you can do it through all different types of activities. Whatever you're doing, bringing this present moment awareness. If you're eating, a lot of us, we may not get to eat, or we may have to eat really fast. But even if you're using a snack, just take time to really bring focus, and it's called mindful eating, to that snack and feeling what it feels like. What the texture is like, what the smell is like, what the taste is like, paying attention to it. That's an opportunity to be mindful and to build your mindful awareness. While you're doing while you're working with community members, or bringing focus and awareness as you're listening to people. While you're walking, noticing the shifting of the weight of your body, noticing your surroundings, noticing what it feels like to have, one foot after another touching the ground that you're walking on. Mindful walking is part of standard mindfulness-based stress reduction training, mindful movement. While you're exercising, instead of going into the gym or wherever you may be doing some exercise and rushing through things, bring mindful awareness into it. Feel the connection between your mind and the movement that you're doing. Cooking, showering. So again, all different ways, allowing your trigger to be your guide. So if there's a particular interaction that annoys you or angers you, or a particular aspect about your day that often causes you to engage with the stress response, allow that to be your reminder to come back to your breath. And you can leave yourself reminders to practice over time. And the more we practice, consistent practice is the key, because the more we practice, the more we build this capacity to have this mindful awareness. And another strategy is called, stop what you're doing. Take a few conscious breaths and feel your feet on the floor, body in the chair. Observe what is going on inside and around you. And then proceed with what is next with more connection and conscious choice. What can go from here? You can try 10 minutes of mindfulness a day for 10 days with an app that I share, or you may already be as a part of a group or practicing. Try some of the mindful transitions, in between things, and being really intentional about it. If there's drop-in sessions in your place of employment, maybe join or think about forming one. And we can talk more about that, after I stop sharing here. It's always important that it's voluntary, obviously, in the workplace. And with that, I'll go ahead and stop my share, and I'll just open up for any questions. And if there isn't any questions, that's okay, but I'm going to leave some time for some silence here for any thoughts people have, questions they want to share before I share any other additional thoughts that I have. So I'm not hearing anything. So, sorry, go ahead, Carlos.
That's right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. Yeah, so a couple things. One of them was, and you sort of mentioned several examples about, at the individual level, things that we can do throughout our day to start to incorporate mindfulness a bit more. I'm curious, sort of at the organizational level, if I was a supervisor and wanted to incorporate this a little bit more with my team, strategies that you might recommend or that you've seen to be helpful. And I know you're doing some stuff here at JBS with us too. So, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that as well, but other things that you've seen to be helpful to start to integrate this at a more team level, or that supervisors might consider.
Yeah, definitely. And, this can be done in different phases and series, but kind of tier one really starts with drop-in sessions, what can be called drop-in sessions. So really it can start with, having like a brown bag session or an informational session within your work environment, doing a presentation similar to what I was just doing now. Now, again, I have something different, a little bit different if I was going to do that. And it would typically last the full almost hour. But as an introduction to mindfulness, because people first, they want to know, what exactly are you talking about when you say mindfulness? And so that introduction to mindfulness is helpful and beneficial place to start. And then from there, at the end of that type of presentation, it's good to talk about what you want to offer, either as a supervisor, an organization, or as the person who may be facilitating this within your company. And obviously having leadership buy-in is key. But drop-in sessions are a really simple and good way. And how does that work? For example, what I do here at JBS is on Mondays and Fridays. On Mondays, I hold about it's scheduled for 20 minutes. I try to keep it to that. You don't want to go past that. You want to be respectful of time for the people who are participating, as well as for the workplace and the culture to say, well, you're taking up too much time with this. But it's simply for folks to drop in and engage in a 10-minute mindfulness practice with their colleagues and peers that's facilitated by myself. So you'd want to identify who's going to be doing this type of work. It would be good for them to have formal training. It's, if you're going to use an app, you don't necessarily have to have formal training, but I would highly recommend it. And I also, do share resources for both formal training, as well as for people who just want to deepen their practice as well and take additional trainings in my resources section. So that's kind of tier one. Tier two is where you can begin to offer things like workshops on different topics. So for example, mindful leadership or mindful communication. Soon I'll be doing a 4-part series here at JBS that will cover the topics of like introduction to mindfulness, mindful communications, and different aspects of mindfulness in the workplace. And there's lots of good, information out there related to things like mindful leadership, mindful communication, how mindfulness can help us to mitigate our stress response or improve our focus, and other aspects of the work that we do. So that's really the second tier, is really adding workshops on specific topics related to the work that you do. Speaking of one, is I know that you shared earlier, I shared a story earlier, and I know that some of you may or may not be here, but some of you may be doing, therapy that involves animal therapy and that sort of thing. And I have a colleague of mine that, owns horses and participates in my mindfulness drop-in sessions. And she just shared a story with me that the other day when she was getting onto her horse, she was stressed out and she was stiff. And therefore, her horse was too. And they were just kind of stiffly riding down the trail together. And she remembered the mindfulness practice and decided, I'm going to remember my mindfulness and bring my awareness into my body here and to my surroundings and into my breath. And she allowed her body to relax on the horse. And she just shared that her horse then also relaxed. And then she shared that she then took in a deep breath and let out a deep breath. And then her horse actually did the same thing. And then they were both riding down the trail together, both feeling much more relaxed. And we had that discussion about, the combination of mindfulness with animal therapy and that sort of thing. And so that's just an example of another special topic that training could be provided on within a workplace that is doing something around those lines. And then there's more robust. Tier 3 is like having, a person that's employed in a company. One of my previous teachers was actually the mindfulness CEO at a large insurance firm that he worked for, and had a full program where he had people working for him. And they had newsletters that they put out and put together. They had several different drop-in session options in person as well, because they were in person. This is going back, also before a lot of things where we had hybrid and remote kicking in. And they had a room designated for mindfulness practice. They had a swipe card that was created for people to use when they go in to use the room. And they began to track how often the room was being used. And they were actually able to do a study within their company to show that people actually had a 29% reduction in stress, in reported perceived stress, workplace stress, as a result of participating in their workplace mindfulness program. That takes time, money, staff, and resources to be up in that third level where you're offering kind of a full, robust mindfulness program within your company. But doing something like the drop-in sessions, that tier one, like I do, or starting to offer some additional workshops related to special topics, if you have somebody who's able to speak to those things, or if you're willing to identify somebody to begin to start taking training, that's very doable. So those are some of the ways that I recommend. And if you're just getting started and you're like, well, I don't have a certification necessarily, but this is something I'd like to start within my workplace. I started it within my workplaces long before I was a certified workplace mindfulness facilitator. And like I said, that's not necessary. I chose to pursue additional education because I wanted to make sure I was, being able to offer this in the best way possible, just like counseling or therapy or anything else that we're doing. But in my previous work environments, I started with using the Calm app. And again, first I started using that with therapy I was doing with both adults and children, where I'd say, hey, would you want to start out with a 5-minute mindfulness practice to start our session today? For those who wanted to, yeah, great, we did. Then we would end, because sometimes during a therapy session, you get really, your emotions get up there. And it was a great way to be grounded at the end and leave feeling, less anxious and that sort of thing. And then I started doing it with my colleagues who were also therapists. And then eventually I was working, in crisis intervention, and I was doing it with my colleagues then, where it's like, hey, I've got the Calm app on my phone. I'm going to go do a 10-minute Calm app. Anybody want to join me? And that started becoming part of our culture within the crisis unit. Each day we would find a time and, several of us would get together and do whatever was the daily calm for the Calm app that day, and I'll show that in a minute. And then, working for my state, I began to integrate that same approach, working for my state and other state employees. We would reserve a conference room throughout the day and meet together and do 10 minutes of the Calm app. And people started saying, like, I look forward to this. This is like my daily oasis. Like, they started talking to their supervisors, telling them about it. And eventually the supervisors kind of bought in from that level, saying, hey, we'd like you to do a meditation for our all hands staff meeting coming up. We'd like you to, give a short presentation on what is mindfulness and the benefits, because they're hearing from their employees, yeah, I was doing the Calm app, that's really helping me. And it's not for everybody. Not everybody was joining, but for those who wanted to, it's an additional option. And one thing to be clear, I'm not saying mindfulness is the panacea, all hands cure to workplace stress. It's a way for us to take control of our own health and well-being. And it's another tool to have. You can also have other things like walk challenges and recipe, books and, book clubs and all kinds of different things. But this is another tool, and the scientific evidence totally backs up the benefits to health and well-being for mindfulness. So you got that piece going for you. Yeah, it's great to see some faces on the screen, and good to see you, Shirley. I know, I work with Shirley here, we work together as well. So glad to see you here. But any other thoughts or questions that people want to share?
Yes. Don't even ask. I'm going to answer. Carlos just knows me. I just have to say, I really look forward to the sessions. They're usually Monday and then Friday. And I try to make everyone, just because I don't always make that time, to be honest. And so when I can just set that time aside, and it's usually just 10 minutes, and it's like, I just really like it a lot. I was talking to my niece earlier today, and I was explaining to her about the one thing that Tamara Levitt is her name on Calm. I even know her name. She talked about the pausing, and that really helped me to do that. So here's an example. When somebody just like pisses you off, it's real easy to just like react and say something back. But one thing Tamara really taught me was about pausing. She said, pause, take a pause, don't react, just pause. And I thought, that really helps, especially in everyday situation, because it's about life is about relationships, and it's about how we relate to other people, and so anyway, it really helped me a lot. So thank you for, like doing these, because it really has helped me in a lot of different ways, because I've had other stuff going on too, and it's just helped me to like breathe, just breathe.
Thanks, Shirley. And yeah, I agree, that when we set it aside in those drop-on sessions, sometimes it's hard for us to do it on our own and stick to a schedule. And we may not do it for a whole month, but when we know we have the drop-in session and we just join, at least we're doing it twice a week or once a week with our peers. And like Shirley said, that pausing, that is really the key. Same thing, if you're working, you get an email that upsets you and you're like, typically would just fire back and then you send it and you're like, ooh, I wish I would not have sent that response. I wish I would have thought about that a little more. It helps us build that awareness specific to the workplace. That can be beneficial. And that's for me, because early on in my life, I allowed things to fly out of my mind very quickly without much thinking about it. That's what led me down the path of mindfulness, honestly. And one of my biggest benefits has been being able to really think before I respond to things. So now you're all going to go and start drop-in sessions wherever it is that you work, right? And I share lots of great apps to do that. I like Calm because you have the daily Calm. You can just do that one. There's one there for each day. You don't have to wade through things and pick and choose and guess what you think people are going to be like. And that's not what it's about. You just apply whatever it is. For me, if I'm guiding, it's my training. I apply my training. I'm not trying to control the outcome. I'm not trying to put on a show. I'm not trying to be the center of attention. I'm just applying my training and allowing people to have their own experience and allowing the outcome to be whatever it is. And we're all going to have our own experience. And I'm not trying to help people or solve anything for people. I'm just there guiding the mindfulness session, and whatever experience people have is what they have. And it's meaningful to them. So I got out of the habit of like, ooh, what will be a good one to pick for today? I'm feeling stressed out, so this one, everybody else will probably like this. I got away from that, and that's why I like my training is great, but the daily Calm is great because whatever it is for the day, for the daily Calm, that's what I go with. And whatever that one is, it is. Whatever experience we have, we have. That seems to work out. So with that, I know we're getting close and I want to try to end a little bit early. But if you all want to stick around and I can showcase the Calm app and just do the quick 5-minute for anxiety release that is offered. It's 5 minutes. If you want to stick around, you can shut off your cameras and we can engage in this. And if you want to drop off, you can also feel free to drop off. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, I have one survey that I need to send out. And it'd be great if everybody could fill that out. I'm sending it in the chat right now. And then, the recording will be available to the listserv in the coming weeks. There's also a form on there for if you have suggestions for office hours, you can, submit that form and let us know what kind of stuff you'd like to see. So that's all I got.
All right. Well, many of you may have seen the Calm app before, or may have not. And there's lots of good apps. So this is just one that I started with many years ago and that I enjoy because it's very user friendly and the audio is great for sharing. So without further ado, for those who'd like to stick around, I'll just do this. I'll go ahead and play this 5-minute calming anxiety. And this is an example of a practice that we can use to calm anxiety in the moment, where some of the other more standard mindfulness practices are meant to build our awareness over time, which over time, the side effect is lower stress because we're becoming more aware of our stress response and doing something about it. So feel free to sit back, feel where your body, is in the chair, making contact with the chair, feeling the weight of your body in your chair. Bringing your focus and attention to your breath, and here we go.
Welcome to this 5-minute meditation for calming anxiety. Start by finding a position that's comfortable with a straight but relaxed back, and rest your hands gently in your lap. Allow your eyes to close gently and begin to relax. Take a moment to bring awareness to how your body feels. There's no right or wrong. We're simply tuning in and noticing. As you become still, bring your attention to the breath. At first, taking a few deep inhalations, long exhalations. With each breath you take, allow your body to feel more and more at ease. Deep inhalation, full exhalation. Now let's practice the technique of rhythmic counting to help concentrate the mind. Just follow my guidance as we inhale to the count of 4, hold for 4, and exhale for 8. We'll start with an inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now allow your breath to fall into a natural rhythm of its own, following each inhale all the way in and all the way back out. Each time a thought or emotion arises, just acknowledge it and allow it to pass like water flowing down a stream. Observe it without pursuing it or rejecting it. Allow the breath to be a healing tool. Inhale the feeling of calm relaxation, and on the exhale, release any remaining tension you may be holding. Breathing in, calm relaxation. Breathing out, a peaceful mind. And as we approach the end of the session, take a moment to notice how you're feeling. Observe if your mind and body feel more calm, more at ease than when you first began the session. Then, when you're ready, bring your attention back to the room and slowly open your eyes. Bring this calm, peaceful state of mind with you into the day.
All right, I'll go ahead and stop the share now. And so it's best practice just to ask if anyone has any thoughts, that they want to share, drop them in the chat or unmute. Otherwise, I wish you all a wonderful day. And that's how basically a drop-in session works. You join folks, join together, welcome folks, do the session and invite people to chime in and let people go on about their day. And let people share their thoughts without any, judgment or whatever the case may be. Just thank people for sharing. Well, Carlos and Kat know how to reach me if there's any follow-up questions. At any time, feel free. And the list of my resources will be sent to you all. It was nice meeting you all. I hope you have a wonderful day.